Hello, I'm Karen Pascal. I'm the Executive Director of the Henri Nouwen Society. Welcome to a new episode of Henri Nouwen Now and Then. Our goal at the Henri Nouwen Society is to extend the rich spiritual legacy of Henri to audiences around the world. Each week we endeavor to bring you an interview with someone who has much to share from their own spiritual life and work, and who has been deeply influenced by the writings of Henri Nouwen. We invite you to share the daily meditations and these podcasts with your friends and family. Through them, we can continue to introduce new audiences to the writings and teachings of Henri Nouwen and remind each listener that they are a beloved child of God. Now let me take a moment to introduce today's guest. Today on this podcast, I am joined by my good friend Steve Bell. Steve is a songwriter, storyteller, and troubadour for the challenging times we're living in. Since 1989, Steve has produced more than 21 solo CDs, received numerous awards and acknowledgement for the excellence of his work, and he's performed with full symphony orchestras on 9 occasions. Home base for Steve is Winnipeg, Canada, but Steve has performed in over 2,000 concerts to more than 500,000 people in 15 different countries of the world. Steve can well be described as a purveyor of truth and beauty and a champion of kindness. Through his writing, he aims to encourage Christian faith and thoughtful living inspired by his music. Steve, you're one of my very favorite singer-songwriters. And in these last few days, as I've been preparing to talk with you, I have been immersed in your writing. You're a deep soul with a wealth of thoughtful and profound insights. Listeners, you're in for a treat. This man has so much to share with us. Welcome, Steve Bell, to Henri Nouwen Now and Then.
Oh, thanks, Karen. It's such an honor. I really appreciate it. This is fun for me.
Well, it's fun for me, too. It's a lot of fun because I know that you've got so much to share. We're hopefully coming to the end of the isolation caused by the pandemic. But how did you as an artist navigate this forced shutdown that COVID brought on us?
Well, part of it is nice in that, like the artist sort of needs that quiet and that remove to sort of dig into their soul and try to unearth what wants to come out. So part of it is, we get so committed to so many things and you find yourself so busy that you're not doing your most essential work. So for, I think a lot of artists, besides the anxiety that comes along with the pandemic, there was something nice about, you know what, I don't have to say no to anything because there's nothing on the table. And so you can just sort of be quiet and you can be still and you can sit by a river forever because there's no work to do. And so there was something about that has been really nice. But the other part is, and I'm a performance artist, so I write songs that I want to sing in front of people. And so that part has been hard because I get a lot of energy by being in front of people. So you do all this sort of work of unearthing what it is you want to get out, and then there's no one to share it with live. And so that's been really hard, and we've sort of geared up and we do all kinds of video work and we've learned how to be online, but that's a one-way investment. There's no energy coming back. You're emoting to a camera and you're getting zero back. So all the energy just goes one way. And so I've had to figure out how do I refuel?
I found it quite fascinating, in a sense, recognizing the kind of artist you are, because you're a storyteller and a singer-songwriter, and they meld so wonderfully together. And for example, in going into the books that I've been reading, the most recent one, Wouldn't You Love to Know, which kind of surrounds the album that you created.
Right.
It's so full of your storytelling. It's so full of your encasing what you do in a story. And you're right, as you described to me how you feed off an audience. Audiences feed off of you because you tell us stories, because you position your work within a story. Maybe take us back a bit and tell me, how did you get to be what you're doing today? How did you get to be a singer-songwriter? Did you always know that's where you were going, or? Oh,
no. Growing up, it never occurred to me once. I played trumpet. I thought I was gonna work as a trumpeter a little bit and then be a high school band teacher. That was my goal.
Oh, wow.
it never even occurred to me. I mean, I didn't write very much music at the time. In my teen years, I mean, I might have written one or two songs.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't even think of myself as a songwriter. I was very shy. I didn't think of myself as a storyteller or a performer, or like I could imagine maybe teaching some high school students band. I mean, that was about as much as it was.
Well, how did this break out in you? Because 21 albums later, my gosh.
I'll try not to tell too long of a story, but what happened was I was supposed to go to Brandon University for music education as a trumpet player. And in high school, they had a great music program there for education, and at the end of high school, I had a bit of I mean, looking back, I realized I had a bit of a nervous breakdown is what happened, of some sort, or some kind of an emotional collapse, and I just couldn't go straight out of high school into university. And so I decided to take a year off after high school and just to chill and bum around and just try to catch my breath and before diving into something new. And I ended up that winter joining a little folk trio band that played the nightclubs. And it took off. Like, it was a little group called Elias, Schritt, and Bell. And it was kind of like a Crosby, Stills, and Nash clone band. And within a very short period of time, it was one of the most popular bands in Winnipeg. And I basically ended up never going to school like I was going to. I eventually sold my trumpet. I bought a guitar that I liked, and then I started what ended up being 10 years in the nightclub scene, trying to make it in sort of the folk pop world. And I had a really good run at it. I was never the lead guy I was very shy. I would never speak on stage, so I was always a secondary person in every band I was in, and never thought of myself as an upfront person, more of a support musician. But I mean, there's no money in it, and 10 years later, I'm married with kids and making no money and gone 6 nights a week and in not really healthy environments.
Uh-huh.
And ended up again quite depressed, burnt out. And then one night I had a very profound experience of the presence of God in my room one night. My wife was asleep next to me, and all of a sudden the room was filled with God, Spirit, Jesus, I'm not sure. But, and this voice said to me, "This time of your life is over. There's something else I have for you to do."
Wow.
And that was the extent of it. I believed it. I believed I had been spoken to, and I thought I was being asked to put my guitar aside, that I was done. And so I basically quit music, started looking for work. Now I'm 30. I have no employable skills. And my wife went back to teaching full time, and I stayed home with the kids. And that was the winter that all the songs that I'm known for now started happening to me.
Wow.
And that's really how I would describe it. Like, I had no vision for what I do. I couldn't have believed for a moment that a Winnipeg folkie could make a career out of singing Christian music, like, or devotion, but not just Christian music, like not the Nashville, but like more the devotional, the kind of the stuff that I'm known for.
Yeah.
But the music started just coming and coming. Every time I picked up scriptures, I'd hear a melody. Like, it was insane. And all of a sudden, I went from writing 1 or 2 songs a decade to writing dozens of songs a year. And they more happened to me than I made them happen. And out of the blue, an old family friend showed up and said, "I think you should do an album." And he pulled out his checkbook and said, "How much would it cost?"
Wow.
And I just pulled a number out of my hat. I said, "I don't know, 10 grand." And he wrote me a check for 10 grand, and that's my first album.
Oh, wow. Isn't that lovely?
Now, what happened out of that, so that album came out, and I had no vision for that. Like, I made 200 copies of like, just on cassettes. And I hoped to sell 100, and then I was going to keep 100 to give away to cousins and uncles and aunties and people like that. And but it started making its rounds, and I started getting calls from people saying, "Can you come and sing at my church?" And I'd say, "No, like, I'm not a minister. I'm a failed bar musician." And so I said no for about 6 months while I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life, looking for work, and finally, this one pastor, he would not leave me alone. He said, "Please come sing 3 songs next Sunday night. You don't have to minister, you don't have to preach, you don't have to do an altar call. Like nothing needs to happen. He says, sing 3 songs and walk off the stage and I'll pay you $200. That's what he said.
Oh.
And I really needed the money. And so then I showed up that Sunday night and I was terrified. I mean, I've been playing bars. I'm not used to people like being quiet and listening intently. In the bars, you're always looking for 1 or 2 tables that are listening to you, and you play to them all night. But to have like 200 people staring at you, and of course, in a Mennonite church, they don't even clap at the end of the song, so it's just really awkward. But something happened to me that night, and having like I said, I never spoken between songs in the clubs ever. But like it involuntarily, and I mean that literally, like it was beyond my control, I started telling stories. It was unplanned. My mouth opened and stories started coming out. And then after about 5 minutes, I'd kind of go, oh, I know where this is heading, and I'd play a song, right? And then I'd open my mouth and a story would come out. And after about 5 minutes, I'd think, oh, I know where this is heading, and I'd play a song. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience, or I was like my own faculties were taken from me for that 45-minute set, and something happened that I never could have imagined or even hoped for.
Wow.
And I remember crying all the way home. I didn't know what had really happened to me, other than I knew that the God that had used my grandparents as missionaries in China and my father as a prison chaplain had used me for something that was beyond me, and that was basically the dawning of what I do now.
Isn't that wonderful? I'm so glad you told me that story. It's amazing, because I know you as the person that I've gone to so many concerts where but half the joy of it isn't just your music, it's your storytelling, to be quite honest. Yeah. It's your contextualizing. And you're a funny guy, you're a charming guy, but you're deep as they come. It's always just a rich feast. It really is.
Oh, thank you.
And it was interesting for me because I haven't done as much reading around your work as I've been doing over the last, I would say, week, as I was kind of preparing for today. And I was so touched by the person's thinking behind what's going on. And you realize God has his hand on you, Steve. And then I also would share with our audience, there's a generosity in you. You have opened doors for many others. You now have a music studio and label. You're based in Winnipeg, but I mean, you're impacting the world really with the talent that you are working with. But you have always had kind of open doors for talents. I guess that person who put 10,000 down on the line to start you. My sense is you started a lot of other people. You've welcomed a lot of people into the arena, and I respect that.
Well, but for me, like I'm not doing what I'm doing now because I saw it and went after it. Other people saw it in me.
Oh.
And other people said, not only do I see it, here's $10,000. And I could probably spend the whole rest of this conversation telling you those stories of people that came along and said, I believe you can do this, this, or this, and here are the resources to back it up. Oh. Whether it be, money, resources, or connections, or, whatever. I mean, there's so many currencies out there that people have to offer. And so I think I learned very early, for one, that this isn't about me, that I'm participating in something bigger than me, and something that has, in some ways, unlimited resources. So therefore, I don't need to hoard them. I don't I have a studio here. I don't need to keep it to myself. I offer it every day. There's somebody else in here that's using my studio. To me, it's an abundant cosmos, and it's an abundant life, and it's not a zero-sum game, and there's nothing I give away takes away from anything from me. It's a river that flows from the throne of God, and there's no reason to hoard it, and I find that, and it's not virtue, this is just my experience. I find that when you are generous, what it's not like you get more stuff. is just that you realize it's a river. It's not like a superstore with limited shelf stocking.
You know what I found that I love as well is in the midst of what I would say is all this humility that you're offering up right now, you're not the least bit afraid of talent, and you bring to the stage people that you feel are much more talented than you.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And I love that. I mean, it's one of the great things that we learn if we work in media, is we learn,
right.
Hire the best people you can find. Hire the people that will make you look better than you could possibly ever look, or be better than you could possibly ever be.
Oh,
and
my
you
goodness.
do that. You really bring forward, on the stage, people that just are fantastic, talented.
Oh no! Oh, for sure. Like even when I put together bands, I always want to make sure that I'm the weakest link in the band, and I don't mean that in a false humility sense. I mean the players like Mike Jansen or Gilles Fournier or Joey Landris or Murray Pulver or any of these people are schooled way deeper. They've got way more capacity with their instruments. They're deep, rich musicians, But what I've learned is it takes nothing away from me. Again, this isn't zero-sum game. What ends up happening is I play better. I'm elevated by their work. Mm. I become a better player. I become a more nuanced musician and communicator. And what I also find a great joy of it is that as much as I've written songs that I hope delight you, I've got these friends that play great, and I hope they delight you too. And so when you let Mike Jansen take a 32-bar solo, and he just rips it up, and I'm looking out at an audience that's never seen anybody ever play like that, and their world just got rocked. They don't live in the same universe they lived in 20 minutes ago.
No.
And that I'm so energized by those moments. Symphony work, doing symphony concerts, and so many of my fans have never been to a symphony orchestra, and they come out, and here are 70 people on a stage. Half of them are playing, $250,000 instruments. This music, in a sense, is like any one of these could do a solo concert and be brilliant, but they all submit to a common score, to a common event that's in some ways beneath them.
Yeah.
But so that a greater thing can happen.
Oh.
And then to me, that speaks of Trinity, that speaks of dynamism, of mutuality that belongs to the heart of God, in whose image we've been made. And you sort of realize when you put 70 people on the stage with that kind of commitment to something beyond them, I mean, that's gospel witness, that's foretaste of the kingdom, that reflects who God is and whose image we've been made in. And even if you don't, drink the Kool-Aid of Christianity, you know it's true. Something true just happened. Something deeply, deeply true, capital T true, not fact true, but spiritually, eternally true just happened. And that you watch people swell and grow and flourish under that experience. Boy, that's worth it for me. That's just wonderful.
Now, when we talked a little while ago and thought, what would we look at, because there's so much good work to look at, and you had suggested, well, why don't we talk a little bit about Pilgrim Year? And I was looking at that, and I thought, that's kind of interesting. It's an amazing kind of marriage of word and music and experience. Tell us a little bit what was in your mind in creating this. By the way, is a 7-book series, but just tell me about Pilgrim Year, because it's not what I expected to find from what I thought was probably a little evangelical singer-songwriter.
Right. Okay, so this is true. I mean, I come out of what I would probably say a fairly kindly fundamentalist evangelical background, like really good. Like my dad is a Baptist preacher. I mean, this is just the culture, the spiritual culture we grew up in, and we had I mean, I don't like I wouldn't put myself in that camp anymore. But it's the mother that birthed me and gave me my faith, and I have deep respect for it and the people that are even still in it to some degree. My mother had a terrible, horrible, debilitating nervous breakdown when I was about 8 years old, and ended up in a mental institution for almost a year, and the mom I knew before then never came back. I lost my mom that year, and this other lady came back that I adore, but it was a deep loss, and for me, without any ability to account for it. And all of a sudden, sort of the pat answers out of the tradition I grew up with didn't work. Like, you couldn't just lob a Bible verse and make the pain go away. And I tried my best, and I couldn't save my mom. I couldn't heal her. God either couldn't or didn't or wouldn't. And as 8 years old, I couldn't figure that out because we're good people. We don't sin very much. We don't smoke. We don't drink. Like all the whatever your childish views of what it is that would that would make God do your bidding, right? Which is in a sense what's happening a lot of times in those scenarios. But I could either go one way. I could reject the God who rejected us, or I could reject the idea in total, or I could think that maybe something else deeper is going on here. And I don't know why I opted for door number 3. And I started paying attention to some of the richer traditions. My dad always, as a prison chaplain, he worked a lot with the Catholic priest. I was often in Catholic worship services. And I started noticing things, and I started feeling the depth of the tradition, and that these weren't a bunch of little like holy hand grenades to launch at problems. This was being steeped in a kind of truth that had nothing to do with belief or had nothing to do with facts. It was deeper than that, and I could feel it in the liturgy. And then I started noticing with the church, the Catholic tradition, this thing called the Liturgical Year, that they followed a different sense of time, that organized their thoughts and their lives and it started to matter to me, and I just started paying attention. But without really much help, when I got out of high school, I found myself more drawn to Catholic, Anglican, or Eastern Orthodox traditions than the tradition I grew up in. But it wasn't until my 30s that I actually started going to a church that was a little folky Protestant church, but they did follow the church calendar year. And as sort of a way of organizing our life together, our faith life together. And it started to come together for me. I started to see the beauty of it, the richness of it. So a few years ago, I realized that for a lot of my friends, this was foreign territory, and I decided that I wanted to write a book series on the church calendar year: Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Holy Week, Easter, and Ordinary Time, and the beauty and I want to say magic, but let's say enchantment of it, and the sort of sacramental view of time that it offers you, and the ability to sort of, in a sense, transcend some of the lesser questions about pain and suffering. I don't mean to diminish them, but that they belong as something to something deeper, and discovering the lives of the saints, and starting to feel that I keep company with Francis and Clare, and with John of the Cross, and with Julian of Norwich, and realizing that not only is this a tradition I belong to, these are the people I'm hanging with. These are my people, that they're available to me. And I wouldn't want to articulate a very specific theology of that. I just sort of feel it in my bones more than anything. And I just sort of realized that I needed to somehow find language and music to pass this on to people. And so I ended up starting to write this little series that started off just as a bunch of blogs. And then someone said to me one time, they said, if you string a bunch of blogs together, you can call it a book. and I just started to realize that I had been doing this for quite a long time already. And then the right kind of people came around and said, yeah, we could see this happening. And then I started actually writing this thing, and I was just going to put it up sort of as an internet book. And then I got a call from Novalis, the Catholic book company, and they said, we hear you doing this, and they said, would you do it with us? Can we publish this? And I said, I'm not a Catholic. and they said, well, you're more Catholic than most of our writers, so let's do it.
Oh, that's great.
So, and they're just such lovely people.
Yeah.
I mean, these are not sort of high-powered business folks. These are just people that really care, love their work, and whenever they see something good, they just want to be part of it. And so it was the easiest book. It was the easiest intro into the book world that I could have ever asked for.
But there's some sort of marriage in it, isn't there? In terms of the music, do you go online to sort of participate in the music? How are the two married, or is it an album alongside? Tell me how you've put those two together.
Oh, well, when I started writing the different chapters, I realized that over the years I'd written songs that would go with them, and then how do you then like communicating through the written word is different than communicating through the sung word, and there's things you can say that you can't say. Like music itself is a language that is not translatable to English or German or French or Italian or it's its own language that doesn't have direct equivalents in other languages. And so, and musicians, like you see this when scholars write and they want to quote, they're English writers, but they want to quote a German-speaking person, and they say, we can't translate this, you have to know the language. And music is kind of like that. Music knows things that no other language can articulate or know. And I realized that a long time ago, and so I thought, how do we put the music with the written word here to sort of just deepen the experience? And so we put out, CDs that would go along with the book, but of course nobody's buying CDs anymore, so we just put them all up on a website.
Uh-huh.
So as you read the book, at the end of a chapter, there'll be a link to, here's a song I wrote or someone else wrote, and you can go to the website and you can listen to it and reflect.
Well, I love hearing the journey of how you've become a contemplative, because that's kind of evident. And this morning it was funny because this was the daily meditation from Henri Nouwen about the contemplative life, and it said the contemplative looks not so much around things but through them into their center. Through their center he discovers the world of spiritual beauty that is more real, has more density, more mass, more energy, and greater intensity than the physical matter. In effect, the beauty of the physical matter is a reflection of its inner content.
Well, see, perfect. And I mean, this is a conversion experience of sorts for me, was reading Nouwen's Behold the Beauty of the Lord. And I remember, I mean, I tried to get into his more prosy things, and I'm kind of pretty ADD, and I have a hard time with the long quiet and all those sorts of things, but having that visual, having those icons, and then reading his reflections and him sort of curating those icons and helping me see through them to what they were looking at. These were glasses. They weren't to be gazed upon as the end point. They were the doorway to something richer, deeper, truer, more alive. And I was reading that book that I first started to glimmer, what if all of creation is that way? Like, what if every tree, every bug, every star, every human, every rock has at some level that capacity to be seen through? Well, that changed my world. And then I read his Prodigal Son and how he sat in front of that painting for days, and the things that he saw through that. I was gobsmacked. Like, can a human being like me learn how to see like that? And so he's full of words like behold, right? I mean, that's a key word, like behold, and then you realize as you're beholding, you're also being held. And that this isn't a one-way street, like this goes both ways. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, like this changes every moment of every day. It changes how I look at everybody, at everything, how I interpret every experience. It's all sacred. It's all pointing outward and inward at the same time, and it's all mystery, but it's all knowable, just not necessarily specifically limited to the English language or my set of metaphors, right? So then I can imagine an eternity of learning new metaphors so I can understand deeper. I can go, I can foresee that would never end. You would never come to the end of the riches that are available as we continue to look and learn how to see, and then how to articulate using the many languages that we've been given, whether that's body language or musical language or linguistic language, dance language, film language, whatever, right? And also you realize, I could hang around for eternity for this. I could see the goodness of that, right?
Mm. That's an amazing image and an amazing understanding that you're bringing to it. I want to talk about this latest album, Wouldn't You Love to Know? And I need to describe it for our listeners. It's not just an album. It's this incredible book. It's so exquisite. It's beautifully crafted. And it just in a sense, I think it parallels what we were just talking about. This sense of seeing beauty and seeing through things and knowing. I've been so touched by it. It slowed me in my tracks just to kind of read word by word your description of each song, where it's come from, where it's going, and then just little moments within it that just took my breath away, to be quite honest. I'm going to start here, right at the beginning. You say, and this is about your own faith, and you've talked a bit about this, and I love this quote. I didn't become a baptized follower of Jesus at the tender age of 9 because Christianity made sense in my head. Indeed, I still find it somewhat bewildering, but something about the story stirred deeply in the dark fecundity of my soul's longing, like a moistened buried seed responding to the warmth of a sun it cannot see or imagine. I haven't come to love God because of what I know, but rather I've come to know God because what I've loved. You caught me with that right at the beginning. And of course, you use one of the favorite Nouwen words, fecundity. I didn't know what fecundity meant until I discovered it from Henri. He was always talking about fecundity, fruitfulness. That was a new word for me.
Well, you get that from soil, right? Like rich, deep soil it's needed for fecundity. It's nutrient rich, right? And it holds moisture, and it's a beautiful word. It's a very beautiful word. To use when we see what happens is that in our sort of a rational or post-rational mindset in modernity, we haven't been able to imagine the depths of the Christian faith outside of this cold calculus sort of way of thinking about it. So, we'll kill each other over doctrines. We'll kill each other. We'll destroy each other over sort of different moral commitments or whatever, as if somehow that's the secret or the essence of our faith. But if we started thinking, fecund or the other great analogy is the womb, that we've been enwombed. I find it really interesting when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus. He says, "You must be born again." Well, that's a maternal image. That's not a male patriarchal image. If anybody wants to have a discussion, does God embody or transcend the feminine, but include? The key line is you must be born again. That you must be rewombed. And there's just something about the darkness and the mystery and of what happens in a womb and the deep connectedness between the child and the mother and the shared nutrients and all that kind of stuff that and a child is being prepared for a world it can't imagine, that it finds bracing and cold and frightening at first, and then the child is also equipped to do that for someone else, to bring life to someone else. You start to really reach into those metaphors, and suddenly, not that theology is not worth our time, it is worth our time. Not that doctrines don't matter, of course they matter, but these aren't essential things. There's something far richer, far deeper, far more beautiful, far more mysterious happening there. And my faith, I think what I'm trying to get at with that, what you read there, is that like I grew up being very mindful of this womb-like safety and beauty and warmth and love and security and moistness. Like I just felt the goodness of God in a way that I couldn't articulate. And then when someone started convincing or telling me sort of basically, well, the face of God is Jesus. And I started looking at those stories of Jesus, and I went, I recognize this. This resonates with how I have always known God since sort of almost pre-language. I looked no further at that point. I didn't need to. It wasn't that I became a Christian over against other faiths. Mm-hmm. It's like I just stopped looking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know what this resonates. And it doesn't even resonate in a way that obliterates other worldviews, but just one, again, that can enwomb all of them, right, and bring them to their deepest selves. Somehow I got that.
In this lovely album, one of the songs is In Praise of Decay, and you struggle to deal with your father's pain, and I was so touched by the encouragement he gave to you. Make peace. He encouraged you to make peace with your powerlessness, and I thought that was profound. Yeah,
Dad was that guy. He had 1,000 lines like that, and the story behind that line was this is when in his dying days, and he's suffering bitterly with pain and indignities, and I remember coming to his room one night, and he's asleep, and as he's sleeping, his body is shuddering with pain. And I'm weeping over my father. And I'm going to start now. And he wakes up and he sees his son struggling, And I just said, Dad, it's just like he was a really good man. He was legitimately a very good man. Oh. And I said, you deserve better than this. You have lived so well. If anybody deserves a glorious exit, it's you. And I said, this isn't right. It's not fair. That's what came out of me. And that's when he looked at me and said, Steve. And then he said, I wish you could hear his tone of voice, because it's with a smile. He says, go away and make your peace with powerlessness. It'll go much better for you. and then he said, I'm not scandalized by suffering. And there's a pause, and then he said, the most beautiful things have happened to me in this bed. He said, people kiss me that have never kissed me. People say tender things that have never said tender things. He says, people touch me that have never touched me. People share things that wouldn't have otherwise. He said, everything I've wanted most in my life is happening around this bed of suffering. And then he said with a wink, who wouldn't wish this on their best friend? Mm. And he wasn't making light of pain or, but you can hear sort of his deep faith in all that, right? And it wasn't just, if you just squint your eyes, you can get through this to the glory. It was the glory.
Wow.
Right? This isn't a passageway to beauty or to salvation or to glory. This is it. In the same way that Henri Nouwen doesn't, like Ronald Rolheiser said about Henri Nouwen's writing one time, he said that what the unique genius about Henri Nouwen is he doesn't write about spirituality. His writing is his spirituality. Yeah. It is the thing it's pointing towards. And Dad saw suffering and glory in the same sort of way.
It's interesting because when you use the word scandalized, it's a word that I actually associated with Henry. He was not scandalized by the pain or scandalized by the issues of sin. He just wasn't scandalized by it. Mm. But that is the most beautiful description. And it's funny because I'd have to say this beautiful little book to me pivots in a way around In Memoriam, which is a song that you wrote for your father after he died in memory. And the other day, I had just read it, and I was dealing with a friend who was going through was actually recognizing that pain, grief, had trapped her almost for a lifetime. And I read your very, very honest assessment about grief that was so beautifully written. I don't know if you want to, if you have it before you, I would suggest you read it to us. If not, I've got it here. But as you begin that, In Memoriam, my father died, if you started there, it was so wonderful how you captured the truth of this.
Okay, so this is how I begin this chapter. I begin, for listeners, basically, with my last album, basically, to summarize, I wrote a book to go with the album. So there's a chapter for every song. So this is the opening of the song I wrote for my dad called In Memoriam. My father died of cancer last summer, July 26th, 2019. Approaching his death, I thought I knew what grief was and certainly expected it to be a rough ride, but it turns out I had no idea. Grief over the death of a beloved one isn't merely a deeper level of sadness or loss than, say, loss of a treasured belonging. It's a different thing altogether. It's a cellular thing. It floods and colors every molecule of your being and significantly alters your perception of everything else. Nothing is the same, nothing will ever be the same, and neither do you want it to be. A return to sameness would be a denial of the beloved's significance. Even now, almost a year later, grief is ever present like a low hum of a highway in the distance.
I just found your genuine understanding and sharing of that so very helpful, so very real. You can't push aside grief. It is its own, it colors life in its own way. And I felt that was wonderfully helpful to my friend, I can tell you. The song is beautiful. The story of how that song came is amazing. Do you mind sharing that? It's quite interesting. I was delighted with it as I read it.
Well, a few months after Dad died, and of course, when Dad died, and anybody that knows me know how profound he was in my life and how hard it was. But around a funeral, you're dealing with other people's grief. You've got all the details, and so you don't get a chance to have your own thing. And so after a couple of months, I said to Nance, my wife, I had to travel to Alberta to do I had some medical issues that needed looking at with my wrist, a specialist there. And I said, is it okay if I just take a couple of extra days and just go grieve my dad? And she said, of course. And so I booked a little hotel, and I'm out there for a few days. And lots happened when I was out there, just being quiet. I just drive into the Rocky Mountains, and I'd sit by a river and cry, But on the last night, I came back, and I was heading home the next day, and I went and got some supper, and I got a bottle of wine. I'm sitting out in my hotel balcony. I'm sort of sipping on this wine, watching the sun go down over the Rocky Mountains. And the first line of that song came. And I was thinking about how around my dad's bed, I got to know some of his friends. I got reacquainted with some of my relatives that I hadn't seen for a long time. Like a lot of things happen around a dying person's deathbed that are lovely, And so this line came to me. Fresh tenderness is burgeoned with the dying of my dad, and I love him all the more for it. And I just realized I was just grateful for all these connections that had happened around my dad's deathbed in his dying days. And so I sat there with that line, and I was thinking, well, that's a line, that could start a song. And about half an hour later, another line came, and then half an hour later, another line came. And over a period of a couple of hours, and I would just pick up my phone, and I sort of just write it into notes so I wouldn't forget. I don't even have my guitar there, so it's not like I can sort of see how this is going to work melodically. Within a few hours and a bottle of wine, this whole song comes out that I wasn't trying to write. And by about midnight, it was done. Like I realized I have a song here that I wasn't even trying to write. And I could save this to something, and I think I copied it, and I wanted to send it to myself in an email, and I erased it by accident. The whole song was gone. Oh. And it's midnight. I'm exhausted emotionally, physically. I've got the better part of a bottle of wine in me, so I'm not exactly, sharp, right? And I realized that if I don't now try to remember the song, I'll never get it back the next day. And I ended up till 4:00 in the morning just remembering this word and that word and going, well, that was the end of a line, so what would that have rhymed with? And I had to rebuild the whole song to remember it. And I did. It took hours. And I finally got the song back. And what I love about that is that the song came as a total gift. Like it came unbidden, but I ended up having to and privileged to having to fight for it at the same time. And that to me was lovely as well, that it came as a gift, but then I had to fight for it. And so somehow in my bizarre imagination that's significant, so it's kind of a fun story.
I liked the story, and the part of me that's lived in the world of being a creative person got it. It met me in an interesting sort of way, and I can remember struggles and how important it is to work to get what's being given to you. Not everything just floats into your head and is a line that works. But I love the fact that you worked to keep something that was such a gift given to you.
Yeah, like it was no work, and it was the most work I've ever put into a song in my life. In an 8-hour period,
Wow.
It was just the stupidest thing. But there's something poetically true and beautiful about that as well, right? So.
Yeah.
I mean, all of life is gift, you know, but it's all work all the time, right? And so it's both. I mean, so to me, I mean that, I don't know, it was a learning moment or a deepening moment for me, but it made the song more meaningful as well.
You know, you wrote in this little book that goes around, Wouldn't You Like to Know? You wrote, whenever we find ourselves mesmerized by the work of a great artist or a great soul, we talk of being spellbound. Steve, I'm spellbound by the artistry and the wisdom that I find in the writings of Steve Bell, and in this conversation, Steve. It's a gift to be with you. It really is, and the thoughtful freshness and realness of what you give us is wonderful. I want people to discover Steve Bell. Yes, he's a great conversationalist. It's fun to talk with Steve Bell. But please go to this website. We'll give you all the links and discover his music and his creativity, and you will be the richer for it. I'm going to entrust the seekers who are listening to the safe hands of Steve Bell. Take a spiritual journey with him. Let him sing to you from the heart of God and the words and the ideas that are fresh and are genuine. He speaks very truthfully. His creations are going to draw you to the deep center that we talked about in terms of contemplation, the deep center that is where God dwells. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. What an honor for me to spend time with Steve Bell. For more resources related to today's conversation, click on the links on the podcast page of our website. You'll find links to anything Steve and I talked about today, as well as book suggestions. If you enjoyed today's podcast, we would be so grateful if you would take time to give us a review or a thumbs up and pass it on to your friends and your companions on the faith journey. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, or follow us on social media for more Henri Nouwen content. For books, videos, and other resources, or if you'd like to receive free daily Henri Nouwen e-meditations, you can follow the links below.